Welcome to episode 218 of the Grip Strip Podcast, the pushing to block edition of the Grip Strip Podcast. My name is Philip Matthew. I'm your host, and I'm, of course, with my co-host, the iRacing Indy 500 champion, a computer genius, a gentleman and a scholar. His name is Joshua Fine. What's going on, man?
I'm doing good, Phil. Of course, back again for another discussion of racing here. Of course, lots of drama to talk about, or drama, as Lee Diffie would say. But of course, got all of that to talk about. Also, NFL draft. We'll talk about our teams here and how they did later on in the show. So, ready to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty to keep the palate cleansed today. IndyCars had more drama and action and controversy in the last week than they've had in about 20 years, probably. Going back to when Al Unser Jr. got DQ'd in 1995. So that's going back 30 years, really. When the split was in the process of happening, too. Shows how long it was, and it was the same team, of course, with Team Penske. We're definitely going to talk about that. We're going to also talk about how Scotty McLaughlin and the Thirsty Threes dominated from pole to win, even though Georgina fell off the bridge. Supposedly Luca Ghiotto mowed down one of her hands on debut. Pietro Fittipaldi's god-awful day almost involved Georgina falling into his lap, which might have been one of the greatest most hilarious things that's ever happened in the history of an IndyCar race, but instead he didn't get that pleasure. We'll talk about how Penske, after getting nailed for cheating, the god-awful stories and acting jobs by Joseph Newgarden and Tim Cindric, Penske going and holding an owners meeting in his bus, and all the other stuff that went on there at Baba. Speaking of Lee Diffie, we'll get in all that and the points. Very tight points battle heading into the month of May. First with the Indy Grand Prix. And then the news of the day, which is David Malukas getting let go from McLaren racing after 4 races where he didn't run at all because he fell off a mountain bike a few months ago. And it shows how fickle IndyCar is when you never even got into basically only had a couple of tests, and in a McLaren car got hurt doing an outside activity, and they had an option in his contract to cut bait after 4 races, which is something. But then after listening to Casey Atwood on the DJD, I guess it isn't such a outrageous thing in a contract, because Casey Atwood went from having a 3-year deal to basically being cut loose by October of 2001, and knowing that he was stuck. I mean, the way they worded it, it sounded like, to me, the way all the dates worked, it would sound like October during the fall race, the EA Sports 500, the Winston 500, not the spring race, because they hadn't really done anything at all at that point. And then he starts running well. So, yeah, so David Malukas doesn't even get into a McLaren car in a competitive setting, in a race setting, and he's out of a ride. But since his dad's a multimillionaire and he used to work for Dale Coyne, or you look at Ed Carpenter Racing, they're just 2 examples of teams that I figure would be in the market to have somebody show up with some cash that has shown ability. But we'll talk about that, what it all means. Cup and Xfinity were at Dover, one of the only races on the Northeast all year, running it in freaking end of April for no explanation, for no reason whatsoever other than NASCAR's shoddy scheduling. Dennis Hamlin wins for a third time in 2024, holding off his buddy Kyle Larson, and basically manipulating the air and driving out of his rear camera, then driving forward. But then it's the Gen 7 car to a T, like what all the things that are bad about it in a nutshell there. But the Xfinity race was exciting and had good racing, but then that's become the norm for the last few years anyway. Ryan Truex, not Junior, gets a second consecutive win at Dover in a Joe Gibbs racing car over Carson Kvapil, who is only making his second start of his career, and 2 top 5 finishes or top 10 finishes. And so far, we know the kid is good. It's kind of been out there, and his ability in late models and the whole thing, but he's jumped in an Xfinity car running on racetracks that he's probably only played on video games and simulators, and jumped in the real deal, and has held his own with a lot of the veterans and outperformed most of his teammates. And so that's there's something to be said about that for Carson Kvapil. We'll get into both of those races, give our thoughts. We'll give our thoughts about our teams in the NFL draft and what they did, what it could mean in terms of roster building, since we're getting in a mini camp, mandatory mini camps or whatever here, or have been going on or getting ready to go on here in the next week or so. 90-man roster time, so trying to maintain a good practice squad, things like that, and also filling holes, obvious holes. That's the hope, that you're doing that in the draft. We'll also talk about some of the, best, what we would say is like best drafts, or whoever kind of really took a step forward in theory, and who might be sitting there wondering, or their fan base is wondering. Probably we'll see where time is at with all that. Round up to talk about NHRA 4-wide at Charlotte. MotoGP at Jerez was outstanding. The TNT, they show basically they give you the world feed with TNT Sports, and it's a very nice, proper presentation, similar to, because Liberty Media owns it, seems like there's a lot of similarities to the Formula One broadcast. So I guess you take it for the good and the bad, but they are able to go and show the race without, I think, with limited commercial interruption or whatever. And then they're able to stream Moto 2, Moto 3, Moto E and stuff on like Max or whatever. I forget what their streaming channel is. But yeah, so we'll talk about the MotoGP race, and in Moto 2, the American Joe Roberts is leading the World Championship, which is historic. I guess there's definite, because it's an American leading the World Championship, first time since Nicky Hayden won the 2006 MotoGP World Championship. It was the last time an American led any of the 3 classes in Grand Prix motorcycle racing. And so we'll talk about all that. Formula E at Monaco, Indy next at Baba, and then we'll preview F1 Academy at Miami and AMA Supercross in Denver. Next to last race of the season, Jet Lawrence on his way to a first Supercross championship after his 7th win of 2024 at in Philly this past weekend. We'll preview the Grand Prix of Miami in the parking lot of Hard Rock Stadium, or what once was Joe Robbie Stadium. So Snowflake, and they'll be racing over Snowflake and whatever dead Miami Dolphins that have been buried under there because of some Jimmy Hoffa bit, and whatever, while Max Verstappen drives around and wins by 30 seconds yet again, since that's what Formula One is at this point. We'll preview Cup and Xfinity at Kansas. I think, is it Cup and Xfinity at Kansas? Or is
Cup
it
and
Truck?
something in is it Truck? Maybe. Cup and something at Kansas.
Because for whatever reason, I remember them saying, yeah, so it's Cup and Trucks, because they said, oh, the next race they're going to have is Darlington. So, yeah, okay, so Cup and
Kansas.
Trucks, we'll do that. Talk about who we're looking at in terms of people that can possibly get the win there. Josh will let us know all things going on in the world of iRacing and gaming in a sim segment, and we'll call it a day. All right, so we'll talk about the Children's of Alabama Indy Grand Prix at Barber Motorsports Park. It was Scott McLaughlin on Saturday with pole, and then he went out there and dominated the race, leading 58 of the race's 90 laps. I mean, the guy who had the second most laps led his root beer float head in a Penske affiliated car, which is crazy to think. But the results at Barber Motorsports Park, Scott McLaughlin wins by 1.31 seconds over William Power. Linus Lundqvist, the rookie for Chip Ganassi Racing, finishes third. Felix Rosenqvist continues his strong start to 2024 with his new team with a fourth place finish. Defending series champion Alex Palou is fifth. Christian Lundgaard started third but finishes sixth. Gets a huge amount of points this weekend to move himself up. Root Beer Floathead was seventh. Colton Herta eighth. Marcus Armstrong ninth, and Kyle Kirkwood rounding out the top 10. Green Rehal was 11th after starting 7th. Romain Grosjean was 12th. And then you have other guys there. Scott Dixon was 15th. Newgarden 16th. Marcus Ericsson 18th. Paddle Award was hitting everything but the lottery. Ended up 23rd. Alexander Rossi fell out with a mechanical issue. And Stingray Robb, I think, was part of where the mannequin fell off the damn bridge. So he probably came in his pants and had to park, because that's the first time he's probably seen a naked woman. But either way, Scotty McLaughlin, Josh, dominated in a weekend where we're going to get into it in more detail, that Penske Racing made fools out of themselves. And Scott McLaughlin was guilty of his own misdeeds with the push to pass on restarts at St. Petersburg. And he admitted to it. He owned it. And in the process, he went out there and had one of his better weekends. And even though he basically had no points coming into this race because he got DQ'd 50 something points, and all of a sudden he goes from 27th to 9th in one shot. So if he goes out at the Indy Grand Prix and does something similar, he's right back in the points championship chase, since there's so little. They barely covered any ground so far this year, or that'll only be the 4th race of the year at that point before they go to the Indianapolis 500. But it was a bad week for Penske. If you're a fan of Penske, if you're one of the drivers of Penske, but in the end, at a track which Penske has dominated, which you could say that about almost any track that IndyCar has ever raced at, Penske gets a 1-2 finish, and Will Power looks like he's back in form as well. So could be a problem for everyone that Scotty McLaughlin gets this win early in the season and basically restarts his championship campaign, Josh.
Yeah, this was a really eventful race. I mean, notwithstanding the drama with Penske in upcoming to this race, but just the race alone, watching it, this was very eventful. I mean, from the start, you had the spin in the back with Stingray Robb collected amongst others, Pato O'Ward, and spinning out Colton Herta and Santino Ferrucci getting together. It seemed like turn 5 and that section of the track was a very popular corner to go in and send it into the corner and use the old eight tires are better than 4 type deal that we normally see in stock cars, and kind of box out whoever was on the outside out of the way there. So that was a popular corner to get really physical here in IndyCar. So Scott McLaughlin, of course, had barely any points coming into this weekend, and now kind of goes out and dominates this race. The strategy, initially with all the yellows, kind of favored the 2 stoppers, but then the timing of the yellows later on helped McLaughlin and the other 3 stoppers, like Will Power, so his teammate there. So great recovery. I mean, we obviously we're probably going to rip into Penske here in a minute, but McLaughlin, at least give him credit, he owned his end of the deal, I think, and comes back out here, gets on the pole, monster lap to put on the pole. Will Power looked like to the very end in qualifying was going to be on the pole, and then McLaughlin just put on a good lap at the very last second there and got the pole, and I think that was part of the advantage that he had. And then of course he goes and dominates this race, and goes out here and puts on a phenomenal job of strategy by his team and Will Power's team as well. So it was looking like between him and Alex Palou and the rest of the 2 stoppers, but Palou, with the way the cautions fell, they pitted, and that gave the advantage back to McLaughlin there on lap 56. So this was lots of stuff happened throughout this race. I mean, we saw Pato O'Ward, like we talked about, get into just about everybody, took out his own teammate there at the end, got into other guys, Pietro Fittipaldi, and somehow he still has a win in this series. So you had that, and then of course, like we talked about earlier, I mean, one of the cautions basically for the mannequin falling over. I mean, what an incredible caution to have, and definitely flipped the strategy for a bunch of guys here in this race. So McLaughlin gets his season kind of back, riding the ship, I guess, with this victory, which, I mean, on pace, I don't think they were ever truly bad, but of course, now that the second place that they had at St. Petersburg, that's thrown out effectively. So now everything from that end is redacted, and now we go to start off the month of May, and a little bit of, I guess, momentum here to start off the month of May as we get ready for the Indianapolis Grand Prix and then the Indianapolis 500 and everything else. So at least for those two Team Penske cars, they had good fortune. Of course, as their other teammate. I think everybody was not playing nicely with Joseph Newgarden this weekend. I think the other guys, they were like, whatever. But this guy, we're gonna really not give him any respect. And you could see there were some clips of him, especially I think with Kiffin Simpson. I want to say he was really boxing out Joseph Newgarden throughout one of the corners, and nobody was really giving him any room throughout the track. I think they knew the deal, and they were going to make it a little bit harder on him on Sunday to be able to have a good race. Despite having relatively good car in practice, they never really got to show it. They finished 16th, starting 8th, so kind of a little bit tougher hill to climb out of, considering the penalty and everything coming back from that for Newgarden in that. But yeah, I think this is definitely, we've only had 3 races to start off this season so far in IndyCar, not counting Thermal. But yeah, this one was definitely, I think, probably the most action-packed that we've seen so far to start off the year.
Yeah, behind Scotty, it was definitely a lot of action. There was intrigue between the 2 and the 3 stoppers. You had Root Beer Floathead leading laps on a road course in an AJ Foyt car, which is absolutely insane to think about, since that hasn't happened since Obama was in office, I think. Because I doubt it happened when Orangeade was. But, in terms of the race itself and Scotty, it isn't any different than most of the races at Barber. I think the guys who start up front usually get off to a lead. Yeah, there was more cautions than usual in an IndyCar race. I think a lot of argy-bargy at turn 5 was a major cause of it. Georgina, whatever, falling off the bridge is hilarious. But, that's kind of IndyCar. And they're going to get more publicity for a mannequin falling off of a bridge than Scott Dixon's probably ever gotten in his whole entire career. Joseph Newgarden's going to get more PR for that, whatever he wants to call that press conference he did, that basically Orangeade level presser that he did, and sitting there, fake crying or whatever, and getting all ragey and saying, "Oh, I'm not a liar." And I'm like, dude, you sound like one of those assholes who were at the steroid hearing in front of Congress, and they all got caught doing steroids, bro. And the guy looks like a guy who's on juice, because he kind of is like robotic. If you ask Connor Daly, I think he would venture to say that his boy has done some PEDs, and the whole rage and all that stuff. I get it. Joseph Newgarden's a 2-time champion. He's one of the best drivers of this era. He's won over 30 races or whatever. He's a legitimate Hall of Famer. But he's forgotten where he came from with no money, basically driving for Sarah Fisher and wrecking every other week. But they kept him because they knew how good he was. And Robin Miller banged on every door for every legitimate top flight team and kept on saying, this guy's the next big thing, this guy's the next big thing. And it was Barber, 12 years ago, I think it was, or 11 years ago when he won his first race. And that's where it started. Well, Barber in 2024 might have been the beginning of the end of people treating Joseph Newgarden or respecting Joseph Newgarden. And it's a shame when you consider he's the reigning Indy 500 champion, 2-time series champion, all these wins. And between himself and also Tim Cindric, who has run Penske Racing essentially for over 2 decades, their response to the penalties and justification almost, is inexplicable. You can't. You're better off at that point. We said we thought we found a loophole. It really wasn't a loophole. We got caught with it. The notion is they were going to race with it at Long Beach, and we saw what the race was anyway. Newgarden was up there with a fast car. Now, if he had that push to pass thing, would he have been able to pass? Would he have been able to pass Scott Dixon? Would that would have meant that Colton Herta wouldn't have been able to get around and hit him and all that? Like there's any number of machinations you can start going through, and IndyCar's had a really bad last few months. The finale at Laguna Seca was arguably one of the worst IndyCar races in recent memory. Then you go into the off season and all the L's that they had, and then you start the season and continue to have L's. The thermal thing was an unmitigated disaster. The hybrid deal is not going to be till the middle of the year, even though they probably shouldn't have it at all for this year. You've got a new. They've made a 2.0 of the aero screen, but now they figured out a way to make it even hotter in the car. And I'm like, are you guys out of your mind? Like, you've had this time to develop it, and you've made the cars hotter. And you have all these great engineering minds and really intelligent people there. And it's almost like IndyCar is going down a path of being like NASCAR, which we'll get into later with Dover. But, Joseph Newgarden is one of the phases of IndyCar, even though PR doesn't bother to show that. Tim Cindric has been the face of Penske Racing when it isn't RP, and neither of them handled this situation well. They also bring a lot of questions to what they've been doing probably over the last year or so. Granted, they didn't win the championship last year. They were in the mix, of course. They won all the ovals. So then, they didn't have push to pass at ovals. But, you just have to wonder, Josh. Power came out basically. I think McLaughlin came out first and then Power with their responses. And McLaughlin almost was trying to stave away any kind of real rage or anger towards him based on what he did and how he did it. And when it comes to like Kyle Moyer, we never heard from him, and he's the strategist. So it's like, he knows. And Kyle Moyer's been there for God knows how many years and worked with Alio and all that stuff. So he's been a Penske guy. And it seems like they handled it well because they were able to go out there and put on quite a performance to go and repeat at Barber. Will Power, like you said, qualified, which, of course, he's the best qualifier in the history of IndyCar. Went out there, he wins the pole. We may see a different story here in terms of who wins, but gets a podium. He's right in the mix with the championship, and trying to give himself a chance at 3 championships, which Joseph Newgarden's also trying to do. But the Kiwi and the Aussie handled it way better than the American, who everyone thinks is European because of how his name is spelled. But and we'll see. But what were your thoughts, Josh, before we move forward? Give the points standings and move towards NASCAR.
Yeah, I think for me, first Newgarden to start off. He has this image, trying to project this image of all American good guy, right? And he has kind of the look on the surface, but when you look at what he's done, what he's said, he's really the villain if you think about it. Go back to 2022 when him and Romain Grosjean had their spat at Nashville, and he was like, "Welcome to IndyCar," and people hated that, and he debated with fans on Twitter, and then somehow winning the Indianapolis 500 last year, but then essentially self-destructing after that somehow, and then he goes on this like, "Oh, I need to be so focused, so I'm not going to follow anybody on social media," which I don't really understand that. And then this press conference where it goes into this teary rant, and talks about how he's not a liar, and how this whole thing was on him, and that it was him that cheated. And I'm like, come on, like this is this is your team, but also I think really they told him to put out that type of press conference, and it's not a surprise that at the same time or shortly after when he did his press conference, they said that they were working on finishing up his deal to extend his contract, and sure they probably slipped in some extra cash for taking the fall there in the press conference. So that's very convenient that report also came out in a short time frame. So yeah, he went out and got all emotional and was like, "Yeah, take the fall. We'll slip you some extra money, bonus money in there for this whole scandal. So and we'll wrap up the deal and extend you past this year." That's what that was. And it would honestly be better. So I had this, I saw on Reddit, on IndyCar Reddit, one of the comments is like, Newgarden should just come out and do the Homelander speech from The Boys, which I don't know if you ever seen that show on Amazon Prime, but there's a show, on The Boys. This is a villain on there that's like the all-American hero, but he's a villain. He looks like almost exactly like Newgarden, or Newgarden almost looks like him. And Homelander goes out on stage, and he's supposed to do this speech where he's admitting to how he's made mistakes and stuff, and then he comes out and flat out says, he's like, "No, I'm stronger than you, I'm better than you, you need me, like I am better." Newgarden should have just went full heel. If we really being honest, maybe this is IndyCar thinking that, or well, I guess Penske trying to generate interest and creating themselves as the villains, and Newgarden's the heel. So, just lean into the heel image and own it, and that would fall more in character, I feel like, than this rant where he went and emotionally tried to defend himself and all that. So yeah, nobody bought that, and of course it showed with how the drivers reacted to the news and how they treated him on the track by pushing him off when they ever had the chance. So yeah, that's on Newgarden. And then the other part, which I think is going to be unique, is how they said that essentially what this was is a line of code that they forgot to take out. And I'm like, well, one, I'm a software engineer. That's my day job, and we go on here and talk about racing, and I'm like, well, there's no way that you can go through, because if this is a production level code, then there's no way that could be an oversight, because typically, you push code out, and when you develop code, you push it out, and there's a review process when you go out before it goes into production, and whoever is like on the team goes and reviews the code and all that. And like, if that's an oversight, then how, I guess it's a huge oversight, because everybody has to look at the code and approve it before it goes out and goes into production. And on the other hand, I mean, if this is like something where you're in the field and you're loading the software into the car, which is probably more likely. I guess it could be if you're like doing stuff on the fly and you just kind of left it in there. But still, I mean, this has been in there since at least 2023, and there's I think at least one team that's trying to push for. I saw like a comment or something that they've complained about how Newgarden, or not Newgarden, but Penske cars have had this. If you look at onboard, that they've been doing this for a while now, and look at onboard from 2023 where they're trying to, I guess, do this push to pass exploit, and that there's evidence of this going back to last year. And so obviously it can't be an oversight because of the review process, and if it was on the fly, then and maybe they were doing stuff and they just forgot to do one thing, well, eventually that would come back and they would be able to look at this and everything. So it's not an oversight to me. This is clearly intentionally left in there. And and also, I mean, it doesn't line up with the ethos of Penske Racing, because Penske, they're known as Penske Perfect. They've always been a team that has always been striving to be the most prepared and best prepared. They've, one of their biggest achievements is the 1994 Indianapolis 500, where they had the secret engine project, the Beast, and that was a, secret project that obviously, they had to keep everything under wraps until they showed up to Indianapolis, and there wasn't any oversight there, and obviously they went out and won that race, and that's probably Roger Penske's magnum opus of achievements in IndyCar, which definitely shook up the sport. So for this to say like, oh, this is an oversight and we accidentally left one line of code in the ECU software, yeah, I find that really believable. So sarcasm, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I think for that, I mean, it's it just, for me, it just, I mean, in a vacuum, it could be seen as believable, or it could happen where you leave a line of code in there. But I find it, given how Penske operates and how how these things typically go, that somebody would have caught on to this at some point before St. Petersburg and said, hey, we need to change this line of code because it's illegal to have this in there for the regular IndyCar races, not counting thermals. So, which I think this is supposed to be like the thermal settings or whatever. So yeah, so it's just their explanation, I think, just hard to believe. And I think with how they treated Newgarden on the track, how the owners went into Penske's bus and went to go complain. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that. And now you kind of go into the month of May with the stain, which obviously some of the team goes out and fix. They went out and kind of recovered from that with McLaughlin and Power getting 1-2, of course. But now you go into the track that you own, the race that everybody looking forward to in the Indianapolis 500 here at the end of May, but going into there with a little bit of stain on your back. So we'll see how this plays out and how Penske recovers from this. But yeah, I mean, it's just a huge issue, and not only that, but there's also the ethics part of it with Penske owning the series and then having a team within it. So there's that aspect of it too. I mean, I will say that at least they penalized them. I mean, they didn't slap them on the wrist or anything and give them like a small points fine or a small money fine, but they went and disqualified them from St. Petersburg. So at least they did that. But yeah, it's definitely an issue that can't be ignored, given that it's probably been around for a while.
And let's also add that he owns one of the two engine manufacturers, because Ilmor it makes the Chevy engines. So I appreciate the computer side, obviously, one of the many reasons, the computer genius that you are, that it goes and speaks to like breaking down all these different things during the weekend and what the two main people who were involved in it and benefited from it the most in theory. To be fair, I think, like you said, it goes back further. There are teams that are getting video and basically like, yeah, they've been using it on restarts for a while, and it's like you have to start looking at every one of these guys' wins from last year. You know, like since this hybrid crap has been going on, in theory, and they've been directly involved with testing from the jump with the hybrid testing. So, I mean, there's a lot of red flags, and IndyCar already has enough bad juju going on leading in what they were leading into the month of May, and when it's the most important month of their season, really, and you're gonna go and have this hanging over the Indianapolis 500 is one thing. You also add that there's been years here recently where Penske has not been fast, and in fact, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years, something like that, you had Will Power in the last row shootout trying to back his way into the Indianapolis 500. And he had won the Indy 500 at that point. And you're talking about having to backdoor your way into it. I mean, so, and this is the same Penske team that year after the Beast engine had two-time IndyCar champions, two-time Indianapolis 500 champions, arguably the best team in the sport, all the great people, Marlboro, all that. You had the last two Indianapolis 500 winners in Mo and Al Jr. and the defending series champ, all these different things. And they didn't make the race. So that's where, like, that's what Indy is. And I mean, granted, I don't know how many cars are going to be trying to make, or going to go to try and make the show. Sounds like 36. So it isn't like there's going to be a whole lot of cars that you have to beat. But Graham Rahall's proof last year, James Hinchcliffe, et cetera, Bobby Rahal. Indianapolis doesn't care who you are. Lone Star JR, when he was holding on for dear life at the end of his career, they didn't care that he was a three-time Indianapolis 500 winner, or two-time, whatever. I think a three-time Indianapolis 500 winner. He was wrecking cars, blowing up, having to get out of his seat for freaking Buddy Lazier or Mike Roth or whatever it was. Indianapolis doesn't care, no matter how good you are. And so it's going to be an interesting month of May for sure. It may not be interesting for the right reasons, but we will see. We'll give it a couple of weeks. We'll go to the Indy Grand Prix, see how things are going by then. But a lot to look into or look forward to as we get into the month of May in Indy cars. We go from drama in Indy cars to blocking in NASCAR. Not blocking like Brett Griffin does to anybody who calls him on his bullshit because he's an inbred horse-tooth jackass. It's for the blocking with aerodynamics because of how great the Gen 7 car is. The Worth 400 at Dover Motor Speedway now instead of Dover Downs International, which was forever. I mean, the race itself, I mean, you had 12 liters or 12 lead changes or 9 liters. Byron was up there for early in the race. Corey LaJoie was on an alternative strategy. Blaney had a car. I probably should have picked him. Martin Truex Jr. had a decent piece trying to repeat what took place the year before at Dover. Larson trying to go for another Dover win, but in the end, Dennis Hamlin gets the victory at Dover, his second of his career, holding off Kyle Larson, who started 21st. Martin Truex Jr. third. Kyle Busch from pole finished fourth. William Clyde Elliott II finished fifth. Noah Gragson started fifth but finished sixth, but was running up front most of the day anyway. Ryan Blaney started on the front row, fell back to seventh. Bowman, another person who I could have probably taken instead of who I did take in my one pool, finished eighth. Daniel Hemrick, consecutive top tens, probably for the first time in his Cup career. And Keebler Gibbs rounds out the top 10. Tyler Reddick, coming off of his win at Talladega, finishes 11th. AJ Allmendinger was up front for the vast majority of the day. Ends up 13th, just behind Ross Chastain and just ahead of Josh Berry. The other two Penske cars, and Gumby Cindric and Joey Logano, 15th and 16th. Chris Buescher, last car on the lead lap, 17 cars on the lead lap. And then Corey Heim, who ended up making his Cup Series debut for Eric Jones, since Eric Jones got hurt at Talladega when he slammed into the fence at an angle, which who had a fracture in his back, so he has to rest, can't drive. And I mean, probably if you're going to talk about a racetrack that probably is the worst racetrack to go to if you have a back injury, Dover is probably up there. And Corey Heim went out there. He was a fill-in, and then also Dave Ellens needed a fill-in, so they had a fill-in driver and a fill-in crew chief in the Petty SDP 43 car. So sounds like the 1980s for Richard Petty back when he stopped being competitive. But for a first time in a Cup car, Corey Heim did all right. I mean, he was over there with other guys who were rookies. He beat some guys that have been at it a while, including the guy who's won more races at Dover than anybody. The farcical limited schedule of Jimmy Johnson, showing that the Gen 7 car does not suit his style, unless it was the Garage 56 Gen 7 car. This car has definitely not fit Jimmy at all, and continues to be the case because he comes to Dover and is completely ordinary. You had Brad Keselowski, he's a former winner there. Then there's a yellow that was caused by Zane Smith that took out Darrell Walsh Jr., and Byron and Bell. Richard spins out lap 322 during, I think, a green flag cycle, I believe, of pit stops, and also involves Josh Berry. Michael McDowell had a mechanical hub issue, and then Ryan Preece had a fire going on that they couldn't get out, and he had to park his car. So, yeah, bad day, brutal day for Bubba and for Bell. There are a couple of them Toyotas. Byron's got 3 wins, so it doesn't make a damn difference. Brad Keselowski didn't need another tough run. He's had a really brutal start to the year. I mean, granted, we're, 11 races into the year, so we're almost at a third of the season. So, in the end, the guys that ended up up front were mostly the ones that were up front the whole day. And wouldn't you know, it was a Gibbs versus Hendrick battle. You had 2 Gibbs cars and 2 Hendrick cars in the top 5. You go and add, and then there's an additional Hendrick and Gibbs car in the top 10. So 6 of the top 10 were those 2 teams. And Hamlin getting another victory, trying to solidify himself. Him and William Byron are both kind of in a R&D mode at this point, trying to get, but at the same time trying to get points, the playoff points, and get those stage points so they can compete for the regular season championship as well. So Hamlin goes out there and does a great job of blocking and manipulating the air at a race at Dover, which was probably one of the best crowds, if not the best crowd they've had in a long time, which is a positive sign. But Denny Hamlin went out there and held off old Young Money to go and get win number 54 of his career. So getting closer and closer to another milestone, tying Krusty Wallace in wins. But Denny Hamlin goes out there. He has a great day. Tyler Reddick probably doesn't have as good of a day as he thought he would. His other driver had a good day going and ends up on the wrong end of it. But I guess that's racing, right?
Yeah, it is racing for sure. It's racing how they were racing for the last 20 laps or so of that event. Denny Hamlin starting to run into traffic. Kyle Larson starting to pick off laps that were slightly better than Hamlin, trying to reel him in using kind of the top line at Dover. And Hamlin, as he kind of started to get slower, he was able to manipulate the air, which not like anything we've seen before at Dover. I mean, we've seen kind of this tactic happen before. It's already hard to pass at Dover as it is, especially being able to get a run off the corner on the front stretch there. That's off turn 4. It's a very hard area to pass at that track. So it's going to take a lot for Larson, who looked like he was better in turn 1 and 2 on the last run, to be able to pass Denny Hamlin for the win. And aero blocking, which we've seen so far this year, just being able to really take away somebody's line and just move to the line that they're running to be able to take it away and make him try to go to another spot. We've seen it at all the tracks, even the 1.5-mile tracks, which this car gets a lot of praise for looking good at. This is a tactic that we're seeing more and more often now. Of course, a lot of people saying, well, we need to take away the rear view cameras, and we need to take away SMT data and stuff. And I mean, I think it's just a natural evolution of how the car is right now. I mean, we've always kind of had this deal, going back to many years ago. Of course, people pointing out that, well, they were taking lines away, aero blocking back in 2012, and kind of really became a thing with how we saw Joey Logano block Kevin Harvick in 2020, I think, for the Kansas race there for the title, I think. And that's kind of where we saw it really come into use. And then, now we've seen it elsewhere. So, and we've seen it all over the place. So it's not a new thing. It's just more pronounced now with the lack of power in this car, and the how the lap times are very, very similar here, with the lack of difference in lap speed that we see on a lap-to-lap basis with this car. So that's kind of the norm now, of course. So it's just kind of symptom of the problem. I think maybe, I mean, I'm not sure about SMT data, because I'm not sure other series does Lewis Hamilton have access to what Max Verstappen is doing throttle input wise? I don't know, but NASCAR, this does seem very unique. And I mean, even if they didn't have SMT data, they'd have the engineers scraping data off of NASCAR Race View or something like that to try to figure out what the drivers are doing. So it's not like it would go away completely if they got rid of SMT data or anything like that. So Hamlin uses the tactics to go out and win the race, and very track position type of race with the drivers that we saw finish in the top 10. Of course, Neil Gragson finishing top 10, very track position like. Daniel Hemrick getting a top 10 out of that, very track position like. AJ Allmendinger getting top 15 track position. Cindric top 15. Josh Berry top 15 track position. So guys that kind of run mid pack normally. I mean, that's still kind of mid pack, but it's certainly closer to the top 10 than what they normally run. So very track position like type race. So not surprising when you get a good pit stop, get a good stage, you end up finishing very high. And I mean, Corey LaJoie led 33 laps there, so he obviously benefited from track position certainly during one of the stages. So during stage 2 there, so that's very interesting there to see kind of different drivers taking the lead, but at least they get time up front, or better time closer towards the front, especially teams like Daniel Hemrick and the colleague team that they don't really run that well normally, and kind of an afterthought honestly, but they got a top 10, so that's a win for that team. And Noah Gragson certainly running better than what he has had in recent weeks, and starting to climb closer into the top 20 for him. So in 21st in the standings right now. So kind of beginning to recover finally after that penalty that they had at the beginning of the year that put them down at the end of the standings. So good for that team, I guess. And I guess Stewart-Haas sort of as a whole, they're not quite on full cylinders yet with all their cars, but we've seen Chase Briscoe. I know you complained about it in the pre-show, but of course for the most part they've had at least one car that's kind of ran well on a given weekend here, and Gragson kind of leading the charge this week there, and Josh Berry having a better run than what he normally has. So at least some of the teams are doing well, but not quite all the way there yet. Of course, Ryan Preece finishing last after gets the car caught on fire at some point, so he gets a last place finish there. But I mean, this Dover track, very hard to pass, and we've seen it years before. I mean, Larson had that one battle with Matt Kenseth many years ago, back in 2016, trying to get his first win, and very hard to pass there, but it was an entertaining battle to watch, and maybe something like that would be certainly more entertaining than seeing Larson, kind of stagnant, half second back, can narrow down to about a quarter of a second. But anytime Denny Hamlin takes the high line in turn 3 and 4, then it takes away Kyle Larson's lap time there, and negates whatever he was able to gain in turn 1 and 2. So that's certainly, certainly part of it. So just part of the deal here that we're coming to expect with this next gen car and aero blocking, and certainly I think as we kind of age into it, we've already seen a lot of it already, but as we age into it and go to some of these mile and a half tracks where it's supposedly good at, we're going to see more of it and get more pronounced, and see how how difficult it is to pass. And people talk about Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson starting in the 20s and making the way up to the front. Well, I mean, it's easier to pass in the mid pack, but once you get closer to the front and the air, there's less traffic, there's less, or well, clean air is harder to starts to get harder to obtain. It's very, very hard to pass up front. So I mean, come at us with being able to come from the 20s. Well, I mean, they didn't win the race, so is it maybe in the back it's easier, but certainly front a lot harder. So we'll see. And certainly I think decisions we talked about with road courses and all that, and obviously one decision they made this year going to the Brickyard 400, and kind of on the rhetoric that next gen car kind of races better now that they can put the Brickyard 400 back on the schedule. Well, it's gonna be interesting to see how, given how that track has always been, Indianapolis for stock cars has always been a pretty tough place to for passing and stuff. So we'll see how bad it looks in the next gen car for sure.
I mean, I think they're going to end up shifting at Indianapolis, kind of like how they used to do at Pocono. I mean, based on the lack of horsepower and the extra gear. But good points you made there in terms of the similarity in speed and the lack of fall off, which, to be honest, has been two of the problems of this car. It has too much grip. Car is sealed off to the ground. So you're going to have the turbulence. If you're going to try to make a pass, like they literally said it early in the broadcast, where Brad was following another car, but he was in the second groove because he needed clean air on his nose, while the other driver was wrapping the bottom. And so that's, I mean, that's literally part of the deal here. I mean, it's been going on since the Twisted Sister car Gen 4 era with the coil, coil binding and all that, with springs, and it's been that way for a long time. Yet NASCAR decided this was their option, and they don't improve the product. They basically make the product worse. They're like, well, we've made it better on 1.5 mile racetracks, and I'll say it's not every 1.5 mile racetrack. You've turned one racetrack into a super speedway type race. Yeah, Texas, which was not compelling at all. And I mean, they're going to go to Kansas, which, because it's worn out, it generally puts on a better show, but it doesn't deserve 2 dates. And then, there's really, I mean, I don't know how we can go, how they're going to keep on going forward with this and keep on saying what they're saying when you have basically the other side of the table basically saying, well, we can do X, Y, and Z, make those changes, and it would be better. The charter agreement and all that, I think, basically is going to have to expire, or they're going to have, in the process of writing the new charter agreement, they're going to have to talk about how to make this car better, because the people that they have making these parts don't seem to know, and it's not acceptable. Because the product, you're getting away from what makes stock car racing by not having good racing on short tracks, good racing on road courses. They didn't have as many before. The Gen 6 car made it more vogue. The Gen 7 car is basically going to reverse it back to where they're only going to have like 2 races on road courses. But I think that box has been opened up because Jim France. It's a Jim France gimmick, this car. Jim France loves road racing because he's the IMSA guy. That's why NASCAR spends so much time at these road courses with an overrated GT3 car. So we'll see what happens with that. We're going to Kansas this week. Hopefully a much better show. On the flip side of that, the Xfinity Series race was actually interesting, was worthwhile. The Bet Rivers 200 at Dover, saw Ryan Truex get his second consecutive win at Dover. Carson Kvapil going and leading late, getting a second place finish. Sam Mayer third. Sheldon Creed fourth, had a chance there to possibly get his first win. Cole Custer won a stage and finished fifth, led 95 laps. So he led the most laps. Justin Allgaier won stage one, led 39 laps. That was second most laps led. Hank Hill finished a couple of spots ahead of Allgaier. Riley Herbst, 16th, probably not indicative of where he ran for a good amount of the race. Bruckshot Jones qualified on pole, finished second in stage one, and then ceased to exist. We had, 10 cautions for 61 laps. You had 6 cars that fell out of the race. The race itself, you had action throughout the field, all them restarts. You had rain and having to restart the race. Jonathan Toney and Cole Custer thought they had the race won when the rain came. It ended up that they weren't. They hadn't made the right decision by staying out. Ended up having to pit, but made something of the day. Allgaier wasn't as lucky. He stayed out longer and lost out in the process. But on a day where Joe Gibbs Racing didn't have the speed and really wasn't in a position to win the race, Ryan Truex took advantage once he got up there and made the moves necessary to go and get a second consecutive win at Dover at the expense of one of the best prospects in the sport in Carson Kvapil. But I mean, one thing that we can say, they showed the list of people that had won in the 88 car, and it always reminds me of Brad Keselowski going and winning at Dover in the 88 car in 2009 during the time when Cup drivers basically ran every Xfinity race, and he had beefs going with Hamlin and Kyle Busch and others, and he was going out there and winning for JRM well before it became what it has become now. So it was interesting, that whole dynamic. But I mean, credit to Ryan Truex and that team to be able to put themselves in a position to get that win with all those late cautions. But yeah, I mean, what else do we take away from that? I mean, you had Chandler Smith was up there. He scored a couple of points. He had his family company on the car this week. But, the current points leader in the Xfinity Series, not his best day. But, it was consolidation. He was ahead of Austin Hill in the end. So he gains points. And we can go and look at Truex and Kvapil, and we'd wish that there would be more often, but Kvapil's limited races, he's not going to run every week. And then Truex, he'll be racing at Portland, and I kind of feel like after Portland, he's not going to have any races the rest of the year. But he's gotten used to that, unfortunately, because of the ways of the world when it comes to sponsorship, Josh.
Yeah, and I think, for Ryan Truex, it's about to call him Ryan Truex Jr. there, but Ryan Truex, of course, he's one of the kind of underdog drivers in the sport, kind of has an underground following. Remember his Go Ryan t-shirts from back in the day, but he's ran well at different times in the 20 car, and of course won this race last year, dominated, and comes out this year and goes out and picks up the win in a clutch move, I would say, but stole it from Carson Kvapil, who I think Carson Kvapil has a brighter future than Ryan Truex, unfortunately. But Ryan Truex, I mean, for being in a Gibbs car, you'd think that he'd eventually get more seat time here, but the sponsorship and stuff. I mean, this is effectively a Toyota sponsoring with their Toyota GR, brand that Toyota Gazoo Racing brand. So it's unfortunate you can't get more sponsorship that would cover him full time in the 20 car, because it'd probably benefit him to run Xfinity full time than it would to have John Hunter Nemechek in the majority of the races for the 20 car there. So Ryan Truex, of course, like I said, kind of an underdog fan favorite. So in this series, so he definitely, I thought I heard something about him saying he enjoyed this win a lot more because it came at the last minute rather than how he dominated the race last year, and being able to steal the win from one of the rising talents in the sport, and Carson Kvapil, who certainly had a shot there, but beat him on the final restart there and was able to hold on for the win. Of course, caution came out at the very end, so ended under caution, but Truex had already cleared him by that point and was well on his way to winning anyways, so wins the race. But I mean, what a run for Carson Kvapil. Only a second start and had an opportunity to win. Just didn't get a good enough restart. Wasn't able to hold off Ryan Truex there. But yeah, good run for him. We'll probably see him more often here later in the year in the Xfinity Series as he gets more opportunities in sponsorship with Dale Jr. there. So good run for him. And I think another guy talked about it had a good run, Kyle Weatherman in the 91, finishing in 8th place there, first top 10 of the year for him in the 91 with Mario Gosselin. So good win for him. And how about Anthony Alfredo winning the Dash for Cash there and the number 5 for our Motorsports. So a couple of underdog guys having good runs today or on Saturday and giving a chance in the spotlight that they normally don't have there. So Anthony, of course, talked about how they have a small team, only 13 employees, and that $100,000 Dash for Cash prize, definitely a good prize for that team. So yeah, a lot of guys here. I mean, it's track position, but still a lot of guys here that finished well. I mean, Jeb Burton in 11th, Ryan Ellis in 13th. So a lot of the guys that don't normally run up front had good days. So but yeah, I mean, this race, definitely had a lot more action for sure compared to Cup. But yeah, a lot of good storylines, I think, that came out of this race.
Yeah, I mean, the going in for Truex, even though he doesn't get to run every week, Kvapil being the next big thing in Xfinity, probably only a matter of time. Probably next year it'll be full time if they can put the budget together, similar to what they did with Josh Berry. He already has the funding with Brandt and all the other sponsors there for Allgaier. And then, Sam Mayer brings daddy's money to the table. Sammy Smith at the moment, he brings his family money to the table. So I don't think they're going to expand to a 5th full-time car. Also because Dale Jr. still wants to race here and there too. So it'll be interesting what happens with that team in general. I mentioned the points, Chandler Smith with 2 wins, and he is the points leader by 1 over Cole Custer. who's the first driver without a win. He's 5th overall. Austin Hill, Jesse Love, Sam Mayer. Then you have right now, Custer, Allgaier, Herbst, AJ Allmendinger, Sheldon Creed, Parker Kligerman, Anthony Alfredo, who they didn't bother to interview Alfredo on the telecast after he won the 100K, which is a fail. But then it's Fox, so wouldn't expect any different from them. And Sammy Smith right now is 15 points above his teammate Buckshot Jones. Ryan Sieg is minus 22. Shane Van Gisbergen minus 34. Curious, where did Dawson Cram? Dawson Cram finished 29th, 3 laps down, driving a New Jersey State Police Troopers United car. So, yeah, that kind of went as well as the NJ State Police does in their actual job. But, yeah, that's the points. I forgot to go over the cup points, so we'll just go back to that. Kyle Larson is the overall points leader by, I think, 15 points on Martin Truex Jr. And then you have Will Byron, who's the playoff points leader with Dennis Hamlin, and his second or third win of the season. Byron has 3 wins as well. Then you have Larson, Elliott, Reddick, Bell, Suarez, who wouldn't be in the playoff without his win. Truex or Blaney, Gibbs rounds out the top 10. Chastain, Bowman, Bubba Wallace, Chase Briscoe, Brad Keselowski, and Joey Logano rounding out the 16. Alrighty, so we're going to go and move on, and we'll move on to the NFL draft. So I'll let you start first, Josh, in regards to your Jacksonville Jaguars. They were able to make their moves, for some players. They've been active in free agency as well. So where do you see the roster, or how do you feel about this roster heading into the mini camps and trying to fill out what is eventually going to be the 56-man roster come early September?
I mean, the first round pick there in Brian Thomas Jr., and that's a excellent pick to start off the class. Of course, Jacksonville with the roster construction last year, with how they had a bunch of number 2 receivers, and as guys that could win their routes, like Calvin Ridley, who they had, and they were trying to re-sign Calvin Ridley, but they were unable to. They got outbidded by their rival in the Tennessee Titans, and they need a replacement for him. And a lot of people talked about potentially a trade with Brandon Ayuk in the San Francisco 49ers, but they decided to go ahead and draft Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, who looks like he's going to be a solid receiver, and he's got he's had some good catch highlights, going up, grabbing the ball out of the air. Good footwork, I think. Release could be better, but he's got good speed. I think 4.33 40-yard dash speed. So big receiver for Trevor Lawrence. And along with Gabe Davis on the outside, Christian Kirk in the slot, this is going to be a really interesting looking offense for the Jaguars, and certainly going to hopefully make them one of the better receiving teams in the NFL, and hopefully unlock, especially with Brian Thomas's speed, unlock some of the more vertical aspects of Trevor Lawrence's game that we saw at Clemson here. So, I mean, I think the first pick, of course, as far as the skill positions go, I think this is definitely doubling down on Trevor Lawrence and being able to give him the best weapons so that they can showcase him, as one of the better quarterbacks in the league, especially as they more than likely will extend him before the start of the regular season, and they more than likely will pay him the most money for the quarterback, as quarterback money always goes in contracts. So, I think this is a great pick, and especially with how they traded down first before picking him at 23 and started the second wave of wide receivers in the first round of the draft on Thursday night. It's definitely a great pick. They had one of the better value compensations there with that draft because they got a fourth round pick, I think, this year, fourth round pick this year, along with 2 future picks in next year's draft. This was definitely great business by Trent Baalke and company, trading with the Minnesota Vikings, trading down to 23 to pick up Brian Thomas Jr. So, great pick there. As I said, second round, Mason Smith, defensive lineman, also from LSU. So, a lot of people weren't sure about this pick. Maybe they're reaching. Definitely a traits guy. Fits the Baalke profile. They're injured, of course, with the ACL, but it looks like, from the people that I follow, Jaguars community online, they like this guy. So, we'll see how it goes, but I think this guy has a lot of potential. So, it's a second round pick, but they need physicality on defense. And I think that was part of the tone, and on offensive line, and that was part of the tone of this draft by the front office for Jacksonville to get a guy that was looked like he's very physical and definitely meets a lot of the profile that they look for in alignments. So maybe a bit of a reach, but it's hard to not like this player in Mason Smith there. So that's good. Jerry Jones, cornerback for FSU. I think he's a really good tail end of day 2 pick there, but he has a lot of potential there, as I think is a slot cornerback and maybe an outside receiver, but definitely a guy that can start day 1 on defense. Of course, FSU guy, and happy to come down to Jacksonville, and said he was a fan of Maurice Jones-Drew back in the day, so gotta like that too. One of my favorite players of all time there. So, good pick there. Rest of the picks, offensive lineman, Javon Foster, Jordan Jefferson. So they picked 3 LSU guys, defensive linemen there, Jordan Jefferson. So not sure about that pick, but they got more depth for nose tackle, defensive line. So got there DeAndre Prince from Ole Miss. So depth on the outside, but somebody that they really liked. And Prince even said in his post-draft interviews, best wide receiver you played against, Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, first-round draft pick for Jacksonville. So very funny there, but that's pretty interesting. Keelan Robinson from Texas, running back. Trent Baalke picking a running back every year he's been a GM, but it seems like the theory behind that pick is that they need another fast return guy, given the return rules being changed, and they likely need 2 return guys, given the changes to the formation for kick returner. They picked kicker Cam Little from Arkansas. Kicker, game that they have. They've had some instability at the kicker position, and so we'll see. If this is a good camp leg. Youngest kicker, I think, drafted ever in the NFL, not even 21 yet. So we'll see how that goes. But, can't hate against getting a kicker in the 6th round. So good pick there. And they got an edge player, Miles Cole from Texas Tech. So looks like, got a lot of defensive line depth, some offensive line depth as well. I feel like overall solid draft. I don't think there was really a lot of questionable picks outside of maybe one. So, some of the rankings say that Jaguars didn't get a good draft in terms of value, but I mean, I think if you look at the players that they got and how it fits into their offense and their overall roster construction, I think certainly one of the better drafts in the league. So didn't come away like how it came away last year, and even some of the picks from the year before when they 2022 they picked Devin Lloyd in the first round, and then in the third round they go and pick another linebacker and Chad Muma. So they got two linebackers in the same draft with high draft picks. That was questionable. Then last year, of course, the second round getting a tight end that's not even a starter in the second round, and then going and picking a running back in the third round when they needed more depth at other positions. Snoop Connor, or that was 2022, and Tank Bigsby last year, their pick was in the third round. So certainly did not come away feeling questionable like it did last year about their draft. So this year feel a lot better. So now it's up to off season here, the rest of training camp. We'll see how it pans out. Looking forward, especially Brian Thomas Jr., seeing how he integrates into this offense, and seeing some hopefully seeing some vertical game after 2 years of a lot of horizontal stuff from Trevor Lawrence. Now let's see if he can chuck it up and go deep like we saw at Clemson for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like for once Trent Baalke actually did a good job in theory. So hitting some of the holes. I mean, that division is wide open. I think it's been that way for a while. But, when you have an established quarterback, when Tennessee right now is rebuilding with a quarterback going into his second year, you have Indianapolis with a second-year quarterback who I think played 3 games. And then Tennessee, Indianapolis, you guys, and then Houston is definitely got a lot of momentum going for themselves, and they got some solid players in the draft as well. Even with all the reactions that CJ Stroud had doing the whatever cast on Bleacher Report. 49ers surprised me in the first round when they went with Ricky Pearsall. There was the rumors, like Josh said, about the trades with Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. In the end, they're not trading either of them, and they keep Ricky Pearsall there as well. One of 2 wide receivers they drafted. The second wide receiver they drafted, that was in the 4th round, Jacob Cowing from Arizona. So they're what it looks like the strat that they went with this draft. It may have not been paint by numbers set, by the book. I think they were trying to get more athletic and become more versatile, based on what happened to them in the Super Bowl, the way that they were able to be broken down by Kermit the Frog, with Rashee Rice, with Isaiah Pacheco, etc. When you have more athletic players, people who can kind of chase the ball around and or make up deficits if they possibly do get beat, that's one aspect of where the Niners focused. And there were 2 other key needs, and those were in the defensive secondary and on the offensive line. On the offensive line, they picked Dominic Pooney from Kansas, who's really great run stopper. He's not a tackle in terms of the NFL, probably going to play inside, which the guards were not great last year. They didn't draft a tackle, like an actual tackle. They drafted Jared Kingston, another in the 6th round, a guard who from USC who I heard through one of the reports, I think on NFL Network or on ESPN, that he projects more in the center position, which in the end, having depth at the offensive line is huge. The 49ers have neglected that over the past few years. It's hurt them. The right side of their line has definitely been a glaring issue. Even when they had McGlinchey, they weren't exactly great on the right side. So the fact that they have 2 additional bodies that are probably going to make the roster to fill out this roster and for the opportunity to go and get reps is a positive thing. Having 2 interior guys. And then DBs, Renardo Green from Florida State in the 2nd round, and Malik Mustafa from Wake Forest, a safety. Another run stopping player, and he projects very well in terms of where he will fit in, trying to go and spell the safeties that we have. You got Tafanga, Talanoa Hufanga combined his names. Hufanga coming back from injury. You have other questions in the secondary, so having another player that can go and fit the mold is a good thing. You have Green, who probably was a reach. They do, right? So they reached for him based on, I think, the way that the draft was going, needing a DB, probably panicked, but they saw something in him in regards to his ability in pass protection. So they take him there at 64. So we'll see what happens. I mean, defensive secondary has been a problem for the Niners for a while. Yes, they have Mooney Ward, but Mooney Ward ran out of gas in the playoffs. They've had other players that kind of picked it up and they made a difference, but it wasn't enough when it comes to the bottom line. And then when it comes to the offensive side, solidifying that offensive line, which has been necessary, getting a couple of athletic wide receivers with good hands. You get the running back out of Louisville who is very fast and has good hands out of the backfield, and also is a good in pass protection. So essentially, it sounds like in a lot of ways, a mini lesser version of CMC. So if that's the case, then for where they got him in the 4th round would be a steal. But we'll see what happens. Kyle Shanahan has made it a yearly tradition of trading somewhere within the draft to go and get another running back. He lives by the saying you can never have too many running backs. He takes that one seriously. So we'll see what happens. They got a linebacker at the end of the draft who's probably going to be a special teams player if he makes the roster. Have a hard time believing he's going to get any real playing time. I mean, they do have Greenlaw, who's hurt for the year, and they have some other questions, so we'll have to see how they handle all that. I mean, in terms of other teams, you had the most questionable pick was probably Michael Penix Jr. at 8 for Atlanta. which, based on certain reports, was Arthur Blank pushing for that one. Penix being a veteran player, being in his mid-20s, going to a team that just gave Kirk Cousins 4 years, 180, is a questionable decision. You would think that they would have went with like a J.J. McCarthy. If they really wanted to go with a quarterback, they would have went with somebody who would have been more of a developmental player, or someone that would have been in a position to wait, that's younger than a guy who was probably pro ready in his mid-20s and could go and contribute right away. And after you get past those top 3 picks, I mean, obviously, we knew what Chicago was going to do at 1. Jaden Daniels going to Washington. There's no surprise with Adam Peters at the helm, with Cliff Kingsbury's basically, air raid kind of system that he runs. Daniels' skill set fits perfectly for that. He had Kyler Murray, so I mean, this is like another person who's got plenty of similarities to that. Then Drake May goes to the Patriots, so there's a high likelihood. I forget who they signed. I think they signed Jacoby Brissett back to come back there, so more than likely Jacoby Brissett starts the season in New England, but I would venture to say that Drake May is going to get in at some point. I took about PFF, and they graded Arizona's as a B+. They drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4 overall. They drafted Rutgers corner Max Melton in the 2nd round. Nailed a lot of offense in the 3rd round. And then they put a lot of pieces together there. So Arizona had a lot of picks and trying to go and turn their deal around. Baltimore Ravens, of course, get an A. They always seem to do well in the draft. Got corner Nate Wiggins in the 1st round. They got a tackle, edge, wide receiver to give help to Lamar Jackson, running back for Marshall, Devin Leary, who's going to pencil in as the number 3 quarterback, more than likely there. So Buffalo Bills, PFF gave them a B- with the Keon Coleman coming in, probably becoming their number 1 receiver. Safety and Cole Bishop, and defensive tackle, rushing defensive tackle, D. Wade Carter out of Duke. You got some offensive line. So we'll see. With Buffalo, they made some weird moves. Carolina spent their first 2 picks on a wide receiver and a running back, trying to help Chase Young. And then they spent the majority of the remainder of the draft on defense to stop all those points. Chicago only had 5 picks. They picked Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze from Washington, the wide receiver. Got an offensive lineman from Yale, offensive tackle from Yale, a punter from Iowa, and an edge rusher from Kansas. Cincinnati gets a B+, trying to go and protect and build from the interior out. They draft Chris Jenkins Jr., Michigan player, the son of former Jet, and I don't know how many other teams he played for. Chris Jenkins drafted a tackle in the first round, got a, some strong players there. Yeah, I don't know who that is. I mean, they drafted a tackle at 29. He drafted an edge at 56. So Denver Broncos get a grade from PFF. Bo Nix was their first pick. Likely is going to be the starter as long as he does what he needs to do leading up to the season. They have an edge in the third round. I think that would be more incomplete, but Detroit, where the draft, of course, was held, they had a couple of corners. They had a safety, interior defensive lineman. Focusing a lot on the defense while going and spending a lot of money on re-upping some of their players. Green Bay B+, Houston Texans B+, no first round pick for them, but still did all right. Indianapolis Colts get an A+ by drafting Latu, the first defensive player drafted after 14 consecutive offensive players. They get Adonai Mitchell out of Texas, tackle in the third round, center in the fourth. So, hitting all the different areas where they needed help. Jaguars got a B from PFF. Kansas City Chiefs go and get a B+ with their situation there. 7 picks. Spending a fourth on a tight end isn't too bad. The Raiders actually had a good draft. But they were picking best available player, it almost seems. Chargers and Jim Harbaugh's first draft as a head coach since his 49er days. Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, best tackle coming out of college. Lad McConkey from Georgia. And, Brendan Rice, the son of the GOAT Jerry Rice, gets picked at 225 in the 7th round. So opportunity. There was a lot of good production for Brendan Rice, and based on what scouts were saying, he should have been picked a heck of a lot higher than the 7th round, but maybe the Chargers made out like bandits. The Rams, the 2 Florida State guys, first and second round, drafting Blake Corum out of Michigan in the 3rd round, filling needs left and right with some of the retirements, including Aaron Donald. Dolphins going and drafting Chop Robinson. A couple of wide receivers in there as well. Vikings B+, they get J.J. McCarthy at 10 and Dallas Turner from Alabama at 17. Patriots. So basically they were giving really good grades to everybody. My favorite player, name-wise, in this draft went to the New Orleans Saints in Kool-Aid McKinstry. You had Kool-Aid McKinstry, Spencer Rattler, and Bub Means. And a Talise Fuaga was the first round. So in terms of unique names, the Saints might have drafted drafted the best there. Malik Neighbors goes to the Giants, essentially gives Daniel Jones another year or so to go and develop to make sure that he'd be the guy for them. New York Jets get an A. They go a lot of offense. Only one tackle, Fashanu for Penn State at 11. So he'll immediately be starting. Eagles get all the way up a couple picks in and hit numerous needs. Draft Jeremiah Trotters Jr., the son of former Philadelphia Eagle linebacker Jeremiah Trotter. You had Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, two corners, trying to go and help Philly's pass defense. Got Pittsburgh. Good draft there. There's San Fran, Seattle, then Tampa Bay. Not sure why they're the best team there, but Tennessee Titans get a B, Commanders A, and that's it. So we'll definitely find out more as we get towards the season, who makes it through and who does what. All right, so let's go with the roundup. Try to make it as quick as possible. I always say that, but in terms of the four-wide nationals, it's Emax Dragway. In the pro categories, pro stock motorcycle, Gage Herrera gets the victory over John Hall and Ellie Tonglet. Richard Gadsden and Ellie Tonglet. So Herrera goes and gets his 13th career victory, second of the year. So he won 11 races last year, so that's pretty epic as a rookie. So we'll see what he does as they go to Route 66 Raceway next. In Pro Stock, Greg Anderson got the win over Aaron Stanfield, Glenn, and Quadra. So I think that was 2 KB Titan cars versus 2 of the Elite cars. So the winner in Funny Car was Matt Hagan, his 50th career win in Funny Cars. Illustrious names up there to compete with that in terms of number of wins. Daniel Wilkerson runner-up, J.R. Todd, John Force. And then in Top Fuel, you had Justin Ashley get the victory over Clay Milliken, Doug Coletta, and Antron Brown. The MotoGP Moto2 at Jerez was very interesting. Very interesting race on Sunday at Jerez. The Moto2 category, Felipe Aldeguer gets the win over Joe Roberts by 1.287 seconds. And then Manuel Gonzalez finishes third. And then You had Sergio Garcia, Albert Arenas, Ayagura, Tony Arbolino, Jeremy Alcoba, Celestino Vietti, and Somikat Chantra rounding out the top 10. MotoGP, Pecco Bagnaia by just under 0.4 of a second wins over Marc Marquez, and then Marco Bezzecchi. He had Alex Marquez finish fourth, Enea Bastianini fifth, Brad Binder, Fabio D'Antonio, Fabio D'Antonio, Miguel Oliveira for Trackhouse, Maverick Vinales, and Pedro Costa rounding out the top 10. Their next race will be at Le Mans in a couple weeks' time. Moving to Formula E. The standings. Trying to get into the race results from the Monaco E-Prix. See Mitch Evans get the victory by just under a second over his teammate. Nick Cassidy had the fastest lap. Stoffel Van Dorn rounds out the podium. Jean-Eric Verne close by, trying to get that podium. Verline, Oliver Rowland, Antonio Felix da Costa, Sasha Fenestraz, Max Gunther, and Norman Nato are rounding out your top 10. The standings heading into the next round of the championship. Verline up by 7 over Nick Cassidy, 13 points over Jake Dennis, 14 over Oliver Rowland. So those are really the four. Those four guys are the ones that are in contention. Mitch Evans put himself back into the mix, sort of, with his win in Monaco to 5th in the points. So, Oklahoma City goes and earns a sweep against New Orleans, so they're moving on to second round. Gonna move off of that. You got so there's that. So Indy next. Nolan Siegel. The race Grand Prix of Alabama this year saw Jacob Abel get the victory over Nolan Siegel, James Rowe, Kyle Collette, Louis Foster, top 5. Miles Rowe was 6th, Michael D'Orlando, Bryce Aaron, Callum Hedge, and Salvador de Alva Jr. I'm trying to see some of the other people. Yuvin Sundarmurthy, Jamie Chadwick, Lindsey Brewer. There's people that don't have any business being on the racetrack, but it is what it is. Oh, look at that. That's I'm forgetting her name now. But she used to be the Colorado Avalanche sideline reporter, but either way, still looking good. Trying to move on. So AMA Supercross in Denver, trying to go and lock up a championship there, because the following race will be at the East-West Shootout in Utah for the 125s, but trying to Yeah, go and figure that out. Sorry, there. The Supercross. I'm gonna close that. The standings heading into Denver this weekend after Jet Lawrence got a 7th win of the year. He's 12 points ahead of Cooper Webb, and that's basically the race for the championship. Eli Tomac minus 41, Chase Sexton minus 43. Then you have Anderson, Roxon, Plessinger, Cooper, and Barsha. And then Hunter Lawrence rounding out the top 10. Let's see. So then the last thing we'll do before we move into the Formula One preview is F1 Academy. Just as a reminder, the all-female category, they raced at Saudi last time out. The Dorian Penn getting the victory in race 1, and then in race 2, Abby Pulling gets the victory. So that was in March. They wait 2 months to go and get in this race car and be able to perform. That's something, like in terms of fatigue with the heat, who knows what it'll be like weather-wise down in Miami this weekend, but it's going to be crowded. I think going on, these ladies are going to be able to go and put on a show. The standings heading over there, Abby Pulling has 11-point lead over Weig, and then Dorian Penn was 3rd. Bianca Bustamante 4th, Marty, Chambers, Edgar, Hamda, Alcabasi, and Hausman and Reiner rounding out the top 10. Alrighty then, so that's the roundup. I definitely need a minute here, so Josh, I'm gonna let you go into the Miami picks for Formula One, and your thoughts on the race itself for this weekend in Formula One.
Let me start off for Formula One. Obviously, back at the Miami International Autodrome, which that's interesting terminology in itself, because it's basically just the parking lot of the Miami Dolphins Stadium. There's some features now integrated into the stadium there. So, very interesting layout. But we all know that Max Verstappen will probably win once again here. And it's interesting we even say that because, I've got colleagues that I was talking to, and they're saying like, oh, well, the fact that it's all domination, there's no competition by one driver, it's all Verstappen. The fact that they wouldn't let Andretti in, he told me, he said, I hope they tank in the ratings. And maybe it's trending in that direction, especially with how the ratings are in America. So we'll see. But I agree with the sentiment and everything. But having said that, I definitely picking Max Verstappen to win, as I said, I think. And I'm going to go ahead and pick Charles Leclerc finishing 2nd on the podium, and to round out, we'll go with Checo Perez on 3rd. So put that down as Perez. So write this down. Miami GP on Sunday, which very expensive. I will not go to that. Rather go to another race. That's a lot more cheaper for the money that you're going to be paying, especially for a campus general admission pass costing like almost $300 online. Yeah, a ridiculous price. But let's see. Josh says that Max to win, snacks for Verstappen, of course. Charles Leclerc, and then Sergio Perez, the Minister of Defense himself, there. So, Max, yeah, Charles and Sergio. So, got that. I mean, interesting outside of that. I mean, with McLaren, of course, in the F1 side, Lando Norris been kind of running up front. We'll see if he can make anything of it here at Miami. Oscar Piastri also kind of running up front too, so we'll see how he does there. Daniel Ricciardo probably on the final straw, his last life with Red Bull and RB over there, so we'll see how he responds after an incident in Shanghai that wasn't really his fault, but he was penalized for. See how he can recover from that. Lewis Hamilton, on a 2-year losing streak now. Not that he would break it here, but had that drive in from 18th to 9th. Part of it, with the sprint that they had in China, and now going here to the U.S. How he performed in front of the Americans here. First leg of the American, part of the schedule, with Coda later on the year. Also, Eminem headlining there, so even old people can headline at F1 events. So, which that's in October there. Eminem, old guy, headlining at the U.S. Grand Prix out in October or whatever. But yeah, I don't know who's headlining this. Hopefully, we don't have to see that massacre that we saw last year with will.i.am. This is Formula One. That was probably one of the more ridiculous things that I've seen. Hopefully, we won't have that anymore. But yeah, a lot of shenanigans that will probably happen off the racetrack, and then on the racetrack, it'll just be another procession in the parking lot like we've seen the last 2 years, which explained to some people today, talking with colleagues and everything, and explaining how they built the circuit, the temporary circuit on the grounds of the Miami Dolphins Stadium. One guy thought that, so the stadium doesn't exist anymore, and they destroyed the stadium, and they built around the stadium. And one guy's like, this is a lot different than it was a couple years ago when he went in 2020, the last time he was there at a Miami Dolphins game. So, yeah, I mean, it's F1 in Florida. I'm sure there are other tracks they could do better at, but we get all the pizzazz and all the glamour here. F1 in Miami for sure.
Yeah, and the fake island and all the other BS that comes with driving in a parking lot. You'd think that after they did it in Dallas back in the 80s, and it was a totally farcical exercise, they wouldn't race in parking lots anymore. But when Stephen Ross is a multi-millionaire and can pay the ridiculous fee, you're racing in a parking lot in whatever, Coral Gables or wherever the hell their town is, that's out on the outskirts of Miami, where Joe Robbie Stadium, what is now Hard Rock Stadium, exists. So yeah, I mean, I heard you picked Fish Lips, you picked Eclair, and Checo for me. GP of Miami. Phil, there he goes. Fish Lips to win, we'll go with Signs in second, and go with Norris in third. In terms of Lewis, we'll see what Mercedes brings in terms of the upgrades. Their car is a piece of crap, but they have another sprint this weekend. With the extra time, will the Mercedes car be a little more competitive? I'll miss out on the sprint because I'll be bowling the state tournament. I'll unfortunately probably have to watch the race itself because I have to contribute to Grid Talk post race, but we'll see what happens with that. Next is the trucks at Kansas. They've had a couple of weeks off, and so they race in Martinsville or whatever, and Texas, I think. So they're 33 drivers for 36, so nobody's going home. You have Brett Moffitt coming back, racing the one for the Tricon, Connor Mozak in the 7, Jennifer Hocobb in her 10 truck. Cam Waters back driving for Thorsport. And trying to go through some of these other ones. Basically, everybody else has been there all season. Caden Honeycutt driving the 45. And yeah, Cam Waters. Sure. And Zane Smith racing for McAnally Hilgeman in the 91 truck. Kansas, 1.5 mile racetrack. We saw Raja win at Vegas earlier this season at 1.5 mile racetracks. We've also seen the McAnally Hilgeman team have a lot of pace. No Kyle Busch, so definitely an opportunity for a regular to get the job done. In terms of the order, I have to look at that. So last week I picked first. So yeah, it actually worked out. You were in order. Did Formula One. We were able to go first. So then I'll go and pick here for the truck series at truck series at Kansas. Phil goes with my winner for this weekend's race at Kentucky. I just said Kansas and Kentucky. Moving another shitty racetrack. I'm gonna go with man. You know what? I'm gonna go with Ty Majeski. Guy is very consistent. I know he's been more of a risk avoidance kind of guy, but their regular season's very short. You want to get a win, give yourself that cushion, and also get the points. So, to win for me, and then my wild card choice will end up being I don't like the guy. I haven't, and he's a real tool, but Brett Moffitt is a champion once upon a time, making a limited starts here. So he's someone that has the knowledge already, and it shouldn't be as bad of a transition for him back into the vehicle. Probably going to spend the whole practice time just getting the feels back and trying to get the most out of the truck for race trim. What say you, Josh, in regards to the truck series?
For me, you took a guy that is fairly conservative in Ty McJeski. Well, I'm going to pick a guy that can afford to take a risk. I'm going to pick Roger Carruth to win. Of course, I think mile and a halves favor him, and his driving style. Spire has been really good. Mile and a halves in the truck series so far this year, so I will pick him to win the race. My wild card, in fact, will be I'm going to go, as probably not a good pick, but I'm going to go with Caden Honeycutt in the 45. Bit out there, but I like his driving style, especially, he's a good short track guy, and the Nice cars can get a top 15 or something like that, on a good day. So I'll go with him.
Yeah, that's why it's a wild card, and Nice trucks have had semblance of pace. They don't really have the shoes as they had with Carson Hocevar. So trying to make up for that lack of experience, especially lack of experience with competitive equipment or somewhat competitive equipment. So we'll see what happens with that. Truck series as it stands, their points. Eckes is the only multi-time winner so far in 2024. Kyle Busch has 2 wins, so the other 5 are amongst 4 drivers. Eckes with 2, Heim with 1, Sanchez and Carruth. Then you have Ty Majeski, who's, I think, leading the points overall. Taylor Gray, Ankrum, Crafton, Tanner Gray, and Grant Enfinger rounding out the top 10. Daniel Dye -5, defending series champion Ben Rhodes -6. Then you have Stu Ball, 17 back, Bailey Curry, and Jake Garcia rounding out the top 15. All right, the Cup Series, Advent Health 400 at Kansas. You have 38 for 30 or 38 for 40, so everybody is going to make the show. Let's see here. Riley Herbst is going to race for Rick Ware. Derek Kraus will be in the 16 for Colleague. Hank Hill will be in the 33. It's lists Eric Jones on the entry list, but then that was before he had got hurt. So that's no. Then you have featured in the Minute Rice Chevy. I think he had Hungry Jack on the car last week. So that's a throwback. It could have been a throwback to Todd Bodine and the CC Welliver team. And one Jim Johnson will be driving for himself in the race sponsors car, the Advent Health Toyota for Legacy Motor Club. Ross Chastain, Busch Light Crocs, Snap-on for Gumby, bioethanol for Bald Spot, Overstock.com for Josh Berry, Consumer Cellular for Keselowski, Corey LaJoy as Gainbridge, Cheddar Scratch Kitchen for Kyle Busch, Napa for Clyde, Bass Pro Shops in Winchester for Gagson, Sport Clips for Hamlin, Menards and Cardell Cabinetry for Blaney, Rush Truck Centers and Cummings for Chase Briscoe, Monster Energy Zero Sugar for Riley Herbst, ProjectWyoming.com for Derek Kraus, Castrol Edge for Busher, Auto Owners Insurance for Truex, Yahoo for Chris Bell, Motorcraft Quick Lane for Harrison Burton, Shell Penzo, Money Line for Bubba Wallace, Raptor Tough for Byron, Hamrick LA Golf, United Rentals for Hank Hill, Love's Travel Stops for Michael McDowell, Long John Silvers for Todd Gillen, Haas Tooling for Ryan Priest, John Nemechek with Family Dollar, Eric Jones Dollar Tree, Monster Energy for Tyler Reddick, mentioned Stenhouse, Bowman, of course, Ally, Children's Mercy Hospital for Haley, Sirius XM for Keebler Gibbs, Focus Health for Zane Smith, Delaware Life Creative 1 for Carson Osavar, and Choice Privileges for Daniel Suarez. Okay, so got so I picked first or that. So Josh, you get first dibs here on the Cup Series. Who do you look for to win, and who is your wild card for this weekend at Kansas?
I'm gonna go with Tyler Reddick to win this week in Kansas Toyota Playground here, as they've won the past 4 races, if you include Denny Hamlin as owner of 2311. So I'm going to pick him to win. And actually, I mean, the 45 has won 3 of the last 4 if you go all the way back to Kurt Busch in 2022. So that'd make 4 out of the last 5 there if he is to go through on Sunday. But I'll pick him, and then wild card, I'll go with Carson Hocevar. I feel like this is a good track for him. He's definitely had some good runs here in the Truck Series over the years. Came close at least once or twice here to win. So go with him as my wild card this week.
Yeah, solid picks there. I mean, Tyler Reddick, the point you made about how the 2311 team has made such a great impression at that racetrack, especially in recent years. My choice for the win is Darrell Walsh Jr., former winner at this racetrack in a 45 car. Someone who has done pretty good at it, even when he wasn't in the 43 or any of these cars. So Darrell Walsh Jr., my pick on that end. And then in terms of the points, mentioned Hocevar or Gregson. I mean, you had 35. Yeah, so that's 17. Yeah, so if we did, so I'm gonna do something that I probably said to myself I would never do. I go with Gagson as my wild card. He's been running well. He's got good momentum. Him and Blickensderfer seem to be doing well as a combination to race or a track that when it comes to build whatever, not build dance, whatever the guy who's with Bass Pro Shop, not Johnny Morris, but go and do some exotics there while he's loaded on a 6-pack of like Shark seltzers or whatever. Insert seltzers into that deal for Gagson as he wakes up from his dream. All right, so that is that part of the show. It's now time for Josh to go and let us know all things going on in the world of iRacing and gaming on the Sim segment. So let us know what's going on, Josh.
And of course, I mean, I think first I have to say the wildcard pick, Noah Gragson there. I mean, you've come a long way since we made the algorithm pick back in 2022 at the Coke 0400 and the gag reaction you had to that, and now picking him as a wild card. So, wow, never thought I'd see the day, but nonetheless, we're here now picking him as a wild card for you. So I picked him several times, now you are. So let's, that's pretty funny.
Not to dry heave when I did it, but
yes.
Once I saw the math and I'm like, this isn't great. You picked Tosavar and I'm like, well, yeah, that actually was good. And then I'm looking and I'm like, oh God,
gotta do
I
it.
have to do it.
Yeah. But anyways, though, the Sim segment, of course, ran GT3 at Laguna Seca in the Ferrari GT3. Didn't run as well as I was wanting to. I ran into a hardware issue with one of my pedals and was only getting like 85 or 86% throttle instead of 100%, and just had to reset the driver and everything, so it was not really a big issue, but I didn't really see it until I was in practice and noticed that I was only getting that amount of throttle, 80 something percent, and I was like, well, I'm not getting 100, that's why I'm losing 0.6 of a second on the front straight and everything. So got that resolved, so at least it's not a me issue. I thought I sucked for a minute, but no, it's just an issue with the pedal, which just recalibrated it really quick in the driver, and then it's getting the 100% feedback again in the game. So just minor issue there, but it'll be fixed and everything and go on forward. But that series is at not Laguna Seca, but Long Beach Street Circuit this week, so that should be good. Mustang Skip Barber Challenge, Red Skuggan Motor Center this week, Global MX5 Cup Olden Park, Toyota GR86 at Long Beach Street Circuit, so that'll be probably pretty fun to be able to try out on there. Rain Masters at Long Beach as well, so a lot of Long Beach here. Love on the server this week. Virtual Challenge fixed series with the Honda Civic amongst the cars available at Laguna Seca this week, so that's interesting there. Let's see, Formula Car this week. We've got Formula V's at Tsukuba Circuit, the rookie Formula Fords Formula V's at Tsukuba Circuit, rookie series for Formula Fords also at Tsukuba Circuit this week. Indy Pro 2000s at Olden Park this week, so got a lot of stuff. IndyCar fixed oval series at Richmond, so that should be interesting as well. In the fixed series, 49 laps at Richmond, so should be interesting. Have done races at the IndyCar series at Iowa, which very worn out track. I think Richmond kind of trending in that direction, but not quite there yet in terms of tire wear, I think, but that's where they're racing at for IndyCar this week, as they are on off week in between this and going into the month of May, so a little bit of schedule divergence on the iRacing IndyCar side versus the real life, of course, because they have to run week to week regardless of the real life schedule there. So that's the IndyCar this week for iRacing. If you want to play that, then of course, Scott on the oval side, ARCA at Daytona, Draft Masters at Talladega this week again, in the 87s, but I think it's an open setup, so that's I know last time I ran that the same guy won like every race, once I got to that split, like second or top split, the same guy won. See, I don't know what setup he was running, but the same guy kept winning, so it got kind of boring there. And that was at Daytona. And Gen 4 also at Daytona, so a little bit of love with Daytona at the old style Gen 4 in the ARCA car, which is based off the old style there. So you got that. Kansas for all the series truck and Cup. Xfinity also at Kansas despite not racing there. So got that. The iRacing 87 car at Stafford this week. So that's a bit of a divergence there because Stafford, kind of a local short track deal up in the Northeast. Modified's running there, a long time. And I guess now iRacing deciding to put the 87 car at Stafford. So that might be interesting. I thought that was a free track already, but I might be mistaking that with another racetrack, another short track from, the old days of iRacing. So, yeah, that's all the iRacing stuff this week. There hasn't been too many news or anything like that, but getting into the month of May, so gotta make them preparations for the Indy 500 later in the month. So, hopefully be able to do that. I mean, gonna make that a priority. So it's not hopefully, it's I gotta go out and do it and everything. So, that's on the priority for this month as we close the month of April. Of course, stream at uSailor2. Go in there and subscribe on Twitch. Follow JPL Fine on Twitter for my Twitter page, and then of course the YouTube page at Gripster Podcasts on there. So go like our page and subscribe to our page and like our videos and all that. Of course, end of April 29th, it is Dale Earnhardt, what would have been Dale Earnhardt's 79th or 73rd birthday, not 79, but 73 for Dale Earnhardt. So, raise hell, praise Dale, as Dale Jr. and others often say. So, happy birthday to Dale Sr., of course. So, gotta say that. Of course, historic driver and one of the greatest of all time. So, glad to be able to talk about it with you. Glad to be able to provide the perspective this week. Of course, IndyCar drama for the first time in a long time. So at least we get to lead on with that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, plenty of stuff to talk about, and it's always a good thing to have that going on here on the GSP, and then being able to put on your thinking cap from work and incorporate it with the argy-bargy that's going on in Penske, Team Penske there. So that was greatly appreciated. Of course, all the hard work you do on the back end with the video side with our videos on the YouTube page, and then also, being that sidekick that, can go and fill in and do these other areas too. So I'm grateful to you as a friend and also as a teammate here and co-host. For me, you can find me PG Matthew 28 on Twitter, Philip G Matthew 28 on Instagram. Find us at philipgmatthew.com for podcast itself, the sound. You can also find us at GripsterPod on Twitter. So that's where you can find me. And with that, we'll see you next week on the GSP to discuss all the action at the events this coming week. So for Josh, I'm Phil. Thanks for listening. See you next time.